Hello guys, it's Evan here, and welcome to another Lambo Life video. Before we move on, I want to ask you to give a thumbs up if you like my video. Honestly, I don't know where I am going with this YouTube channel, but rest assured, I'm gonna keep creating content on crypto. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe and give me some suggestions on what the next video should be. I aim to create more crypto content that is unique, so please give me your feedback in the comments down below. This video is about Andreas Antonopoulos' controversial statements. Andreas doesn't need much introduction. He is, after all, one of the most respected influencers in the crypto space. What sets Andreas apart from everyone else is his firm principles on decentralization. Being a proponent of PPC, off-chain scaling, and Lightning Network, among other things, he believes that a sufficiently decentralized system is the only approach that is effective when it comes to cryptocurrencies. He doesn't possess a reserved demeanor either. Andreas is very vocal on his views and would not shy away from blasting any individual who would voice out their uncalled for opinions on Bitcoin or blockchain. Not even Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan nor the government. Being called out by Andreas is not something anyone would want because unlike Roger Ver, a lot of people actually believe in him. He recently expressed his disappointment on Shapeshift's decision to implement KYC in a tweet, causing the founder Eric Voorhees to be criticized. As much as he is a self-proclaimed pacifist, you don't want to mess with him.
A couple of weeks ago, Jamie Dimon criticized Bitcoin.
I believe his specific criticism was, and I may paraphrase, that Bitcoin is a fraud that has no financial basis and is not backed by anything. By Jamie Dimon, head of JP Morgan Chase, who actually got fined $2 billion for mortgage fraud, which JP Morgan Chase paid by committing more mortgage fraud. I don't know if you've seen that news. That was particularly fascinating. And they did this all on the dollar, which is backed by, oh, right. So, I think my most honest reaction is Jamie doth protest too much, methinks. And it's interesting how the head of the largest investment bank in the world finds time in his very, very busy day to speak about a nothing, an irrelevant little technology that has no impact on the world. It's almost disconcerting that he would pay so much attention. By the way, as he was saying that, JP Morgan traders were buying Bitcoin. FedCoin is coming. And it will come to many different countries, and it will pretend to be a cryptocurrency and a blockchain, and it will offer fractional lending and full surveillance and controls and confiscation and all of the other wonderful things that we have with fiat, only now on a blockchain cryptocurrency, creating money that doesn't exist and inflating bubbles by spreading liquidity through centralized decision-making and all of those shenanigans. Governments are full of innovation, and they will soon develop cryptocurrencies, or what they will call cryptocurrencies and blockchains, that are essentially highly centralized databases that allow them to continue business as usual with not even a pause in their standard practices, and create the next giant financial bubble of out-of-control predatory lending, now brought to you on a cryptographically secured blockchain, which is, of course, just a database. The best thing Satoshi Nakamoto ever did was disappear. The second best was invent Bitcoin.
Bitcoin was weird. And I really, really loved Bitcoin when it was weird.
But for some people, Bitcoin was too weird. Maybe difficult to understand. And there's a small possibility that you could buy drugs with Bitcoin. But not the good drugs, right? Not the drugs made by Pfizer that cost a lot of money, right? Not Adderall, which is methamphetamine, not fentanyl, which is heroin, not prescription good drugs, bad drugs, like marijuana. And people could buy drugs and they could do other things that were not very good for the corporate image. How do you take something that is weird and dress it up in a suit, give it a haircut, and present it to the board of executives? And they would say to me, we want you to talk to our executives. But when you talk to our executives, if you could, please say blockchain. Don't say Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is weird. And blockchain is the future. And I said, no. I won't say blockchain. I will say Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the future. And blockchain is bullshit. And I'll also say bullshit to your executives. Because you paid me to come here to tell you the truth as I see it. And I'm not going to try to sell you something that's nicely packaged just to avoid offending. I'm interested in telling the truth. And the reason cryptocurrencies are interesting, the reason Bitcoin is interesting, is because it's not controlled, because it can't be censored, because it's open, because a lot of the people involved are very, very weird. And these weird people are why I'm involved in Bitcoin. Because I'm weird too, and that's okay. And if you take all of that out, what you're left with, this blockchain, is a sterile, unexpressive, uninvented environment, a corporate plaything that has been sanitized of everything interesting and left as an empty shell. It's basically a very slow database. The truth is that the term blockchain has been hijacked, mostly by financial technology companies, to piggyback on the idea of these properties, these positive properties. But in fact, to enable mostly the banks to try to do business as usual without changing anything. So blockchain is a marketing term that strips all of the interesting properties of openness, neutrality, decentralization, borderless action, and censorship resistance, and turns it into a slow, inefficient database that allows banks to remain in control of centralized, surveillance-focused money without any of the interesting properties. If they want to go and play the blockchain, not Bitcoin game, let them go and play the blockchain, not Bitcoin game. I don't think it's our job to persuade other people about the merits of this technology if what they can understand about this technology is a slogan that has really played out itself since 2014. I think it's a cliche. When somebody says, I believe in blockchain, but I'm not interested in Bitcoin, I think they're basically saying, I don't understand blockchain. But I've heard enough to think that I can sound cool by dismissing Bitcoin and praising blockchain, because I've heard a lot of other people say that.
When do we think we're going to see blockchain adopted by the biggest marketplaces like Amazon and by the mass sellers and buyers?
What kind of blockchain? An open, neutral, borderless, censorship-resistant blockchain? Well, arguably, it's going to be difficult for big sellers to adopt that because they have to operate within a system of money as weaponized political control. And so they cannot accept money that is open. It creates this incredible conundrum where open money is a bit of a poison pill for closed, centralized corporations. The question is not whether they will adopt it, because they represent centralized, hierarchical, controlled retail. The question is, will you adopt it to sell your product directly to another person? If you think commerce should be person to person, rather than person to corporation to Visa to investment bank to MasterCard to corporation to JP Morgan Chase to corporation to person. So I don't know if they're going to adopt it, but who gives a damn? Why don't you adopt it? Why don't you build something? Commerce has always been local. Governments have tried to control the printing press. Governments have tried to control the internet. Governments have tried to control radios. Governments have tried to control many forms of expression and communication. In the end, they fail. And they will fail again here. I think control is an illusion. And maintaining the illusion of control with the illusion of power is delusion. The bottom line is that technologies like Bitcoin are not allowed. They simply never ask for permission. They exist despite government control. And historically, attempts by governments to control technologies have proven again and again and again to be utterly futile. Everybody's so excited about ETFs. But the other side of it is that there's always these claims that the commodities markets are heavily manipulated, and opening up these exchange-traded instruments only increases the ability of institutional investors to manipulate, especially large market makers, to manipulate the prices of commodities, not just in the markets where it's traded as an ETF, but more broadly. So if you have a gold ETF and people can trade that, then big market players can manipulate the price of gold worldwide, not just in the ETF, because, of course, it's a worldwide liquid market. I'm going to burst your bubble. I know a lot of people really want to see an ETF happen because to the moon and Lambos and all of that. I think it's a terrible idea. I still think it's going to happen. I just think it's a terrible idea. I'm actually against ETFs. People, what is a smart contract? Well, it's not smart and it's not a contract. A smart contract is a dumb program. A smart contract is a program written in a language that is executed inside a blockchain-based virtual machine. It's a program, and they're not particularly smart. They're fairly unsophisticated software programs. The important part being that they manage money. Casework on this. The term smart contract is very, very loosely used and should not be considered a contract. Is there enough being done to confirm that smart contracts will work in the way that people have envisioned they will work? Currently, I mean, the problem here is that the vision is far more expansive than what can currently be done with smart contracts. So people envision all kinds of things. Whether you can do all of those, all kinds of things, is a whole other question. And I think people sometimes go way too far in coming up with these crazy ideas to replace things, even things that currently work, with smart contracts. The term smart contracts is beginning to become as vague and full of bullshit as the term blockchain or the term AI. It doesn't really mean what most people think it means. Why would a company use a permission centralized blockchain to track supply chain procedures? What efficiencies are gained over using a traditional database or the cloud? Phil, that is a very astute question, and if you ever find the answer to that, I would love to know it. Other than the fact that it allows you to stick every possible new buzzword into your marketing brochure, perhaps raise a whole ton of money in a underground ICO from a non-extradition tax haven country and bamboozle a ton of investors, I'm not quite sure what the point of these centralized permission supply chain blockchains is. In fact, the very word centralized blockchain is an oxymoron. And permissioned blockchains are almost equally an oxymoron. Blockchains are structures that are useful in creating decentralization and open access. Making them centralized and permissioned completely removes the need for running a blockchain, and in that case, it is simply a very, very inefficient database. Let them try to create a supply chain. In fact, what we're going to see is every company tries to make their own. None of them are interoperable. All of them give too much power to the company that owns it. Therefore, none of the competitors will want to use it. Therefore, it's just an inefficient database. Millions and millions of dollars will be wasted on this bullshit. More astute questions for us, all of which reveal some very interesting gaps in this idea of using blockchains for other industries. Would someone who uploads a hash of a music file on the blockchain prove that he, she is the first creator? Yeah, exactly. That is precisely the problem with trying to use blockchains to do digital rights management and provenance and all of the other stuff, which is that garbage in gives you garbage out. If you have a blockchain that guarantees that information is recorded accurately forever, that doesn't mean that information is true. It's only true if you can validate it with consensus rules that remove centralized power. But if anybody can simply put a hash up, that doesn't prove anything. You can't prove identity, you can't prove provenance, and you cannot prove ownership. And if you have a third party proving identity, provenance, or ownership, then it's not a decentralized blockchain. It's simply a database for registering the decisions of a committee, registry, agency, etc. Again, an inefficient database. Furthermore, using hashes to identify unique pieces of content like music or video has been proven again and again and again to be completely pointless, because all you need to do is change one bit and the hash won't match anymore. So you can't verify that a piece of content is the same. So all of this, really, I think I just demolished the ICO pitch and white paper of at least 20 different startups that are playing around with this concept. But the truth is that there really isn't much of a use case for provenance of music and other things like that simply by doing proof of existence. Okay, let's destroy industry number 3. Phil asks, how would a patient holding his private key make the healthcare record management simpler? How could blockchain-based healthcare data be accessed if a patient who holds the private keys is in a coma? Well, fortunately, most of these things have been designed by startup people who seem to be in a coma when they were writing the white paper, because none of this makes any sense. The idea that you would put healthcare data, which is the ultimate most private data, on a public distributed ledger is asinine at best. Healthcare is probably one of the most narrow applications for blockchain technology, despite the fact that millions are being raised by companies at the moment to do healthcare records management. Ask yourself this: which problem in healthcare records management do you solve by a global, neutral, censorship-resistant, decentralized system? Because that's what a blockchain is. Is someone trying to do censorship on records management? Is someone trying to introduce non-neutral data in healthcare records management? Is someone trying to artificially raise borders in healthcare records management? Is it a problem that the healthcare records management participants do not trust each other and cannot vest power in anyone? None of these things are really solved by a blockchain, because the problems in healthcare records management are not problems that relate to blockchains. Part of the reason we have these explosions of hyperinflation and these issues with fiat currencies is because there are enormous barriers to arbitrage between different currencies, borders. limitations on capital transfer and flow, which allow governments to effectively take an entire population hostage. The only reason it can go out of control is because this method of indirect taxation, theft, from the productive classes is only possible if you can apply currency controls, take the entire population hostage, and take them on a suicide drive into oblivion of the monetary system. And that is no longer possible.
So the open winning argument of the internet, as much as it hurts me, is problematic because Facebook made it easier to publish, much like banks make it easier to understand money.
Yeah.
What do we do about that gap in the perception of how easy it would be to have an open payment system?
We wait. Because if you think Facebook is going to be around forever, then you need to remember that at some point Microsoft controlled 80% of the operating system market because they made Windows easy to use on the desktop, and you could not use anything else. And now Microsoft is dominated by open technologies and open source because they had to succumb to the open internet. They lost the battle to close that, and I think Facebook is already losing. How many here use it as your first platform of choice? Oh, not a single hand. And kids nowadays don't join Facebook because their grandparents are on Facebook. Right? So the bottom line, I think privacy is probably one of the most fundamental things that needs to be done, and it needs to be done in the base protocol of Bitcoin. And it is on the roadmap, honestly. I've made some controversial statements before, and I'll make a controversial statement now, which is privacy before scaling. And the reason privacy before scaling is because you can do scaling in layer 2, and you can't do privacy in layer 2 if layer 1 isn't private. And we learned that lesson the hard way with the internet, and it has been a disaster from that perspective. IPv4 did not incorporate privacy features, and as a result, the correct economic incentives were there to turn the entire internet into a giant surveillance machine. I believe I'm pronouncing this name correctly. Pachelik asks, Bitcoin will never add default privacy or fungibility, within quotes. Ari Paul believes that it's highly unlikely that Bitcoin adds default privacy or fungibility, and again within quotes, because this would likely tank the price, since it means that all institutional and regulation-conscious money will have to dump it. The question continues, there are many other reasons why people might not support a default privacy update as well. Realistically, do you think it's in any way plausible for the main chain to add default privacy? To me, Bitcoin has never been about the investment and use of institutional and regulation-conscious money. Institutional regulation-conscious money already has plenty of investment avenues and plenty of currencies to choose from. So if the addition of privacy and fungibility features actually did reduce the price of Bitcoin, I'm okay with that. Quite honestly, I don't give a damn what institutional and regulation-conscious money does. And I certainly don't think the developers who are involved in implementing features, the cypherpunks of Bitcoin, really give a damn about what investment-conscious money does. So there will be additions of privacy and fungibility. They are very much on the roadmap. And if that causes regulation-conscious money and investment-conscious money to leave Bitcoin, well, that's a very good indication that those privacy and fungibility technologies are effective and working correctly. They're going to have to find some other kind of surveillance coin that they can pump and dump for a get-rich-quick scheme. Ripple sounds like a good idea. Maybe they could go to that one. And let Bitcoin do the privacy things that it needs to do to serve the other 6 billion people who are not interested in playing this game of crony surveillance capitalism. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
That's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching Lambo Life. Please don't forget to give a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. So what do you want the next video to be about? Leave your answer in the comments.